Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined this week by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Famiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
How you doing, Dave?
How are you?
Pretty good. It feels a little strange being back in the Access Humboldt studio here, but thankfully, COVID safety is now a thing. We're all vaccinated and everybody's taking measures. I look forward to you guys joining me here sometime in an upcoming edition also.
Get a couple childcare things figured out and we'll be all back together.
Well, right on. Let's dive right in. Thad, why don't you tell us what's on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, with this week we have a story about Dishkamu Humboldt, which is a kind of groundbreaking Wiyot-led land trust that is getting off the ground. Currently, it's a collaboration between the Wiyot tribe and Cooperation Humboldt, and has some really ambitious goals of projects that it wants to take on, and a new framework for kind of how it plans to achieve those.
Well, so for folks who haven't heard about this at all, can you tell us about the sort of big picture, what their vision looks like, and what's the structure of this land trust?
Yeah, so I think people typically think of a land trust, or a land trust typically is an organization, a nonprofit that acquires land and holds them in trust, but really not, to keep them undeveloped, to keep them preserved. And this is a different type of land trust. And so this is a partnership, like I said, through the local nonprofit Cooperation Humboldt and the Wiyot tribe. And the goal is really twofold. One is to bring back more land into more of the Wiyot tribe's ancestral territory under Wiyot ownership, and to put them in control of more lands locally. And then the other is to move forward some cooperative economic development projects that Cooperation Humboldt has been looking at for some time now. And so they found that kind of those interests really coalesce, and the Cooperation Humboldt got a lot of input from the Wiyot tribe about some of its projects. And then I think early last year, they decided to formally partner and pursue this land trust idea.
Well, right on. So just like to break it down into some of the constituent parts, one of the smaller, more attainable elements here, can you tell us a little bit about who are the principals, like who you spoke with, and then what their vision is for some of the shorter term projects that are going to be part of this overall larger trust?
Yeah, so I talked to three principals for the story. David Cobb, who's a co-founder and executive director of Cooperation Humboldt. Many probably know him. He was a former Green Party presidential candidate some years ago. And then I spoke to Michelle Vassell, who is a tribal administrator for the Wiyot tribe. And then Taj James, who is the principal at Full Spectrum Capital Partners. Which is kind of the funding leg of the three-legged stool that this thing will stand on. And one thing that I thought was really interesting about kind of the framework of this land trust is they wanted it to be genuinely Wiyot-led, and have the tribe really lead the way on this and making decisions about what this land trust is going to do and what it's going to be in perpetuity. And so they actually wrote that into the bylaws of the land trust. So the land trust will be governed by a 7-member board. And in the framework, the Wiyot tribe will forever get to choose 4 of those members, 4 of those board members. So it will always have a Wiyot-appointed majority on the board. And then the 3 other members would be appointed by one by Cooperation Humboldt, one by Full Spectrum Capital Partners, and the third by the Humboldt Area Foundation. And so that really puts the tribe in the driver's seat of kind of determining the future of this thing and the direction, from what big picture goals it wants to accomplish to what projects it wants to prioritize. And the first project that it's hoping to take on, it's going to be submitting proposals for the Eureka's has issued a request for proposals. As I think many people know, it's somewhat controversial, but turning a number of city-owned parking lots in Eureka into multifamily apartment housing structures with low-income components. In an effort to kind of relieve the housing crunch that is in Eureka and in all of Humboldt County. But the Land Trust is coming up with two separate proposals for two separate projects. One would be to create a senior housing facility, and another would be to create a family mixed-use housing facility. For both of them, they're pursuing all kinds of green technologies and are really trying to be ambitious in envisioning these as not like low-income housing projects, but of kind of cutting-edge, new wave design housing projects that, in the words of David Cobb, you or I or any of our readers would want to live in.
So there were a couple really neat elements about the housing, I think, that I saw in the article. One has to do with WIA ownership, or in this case, I guess, of the underlying land. Can you tell us a little bit about how that might manifest itself in terms of ownership of the housing proper, and then secondarily the cutting edge technologies working with the university about the materials and technology involved. You want to tell us a little bit about each of those elements?
Yeah, so for the Eureka projects, they're working in consultation with Schatz Energy Lab, and one thing that I have to say is just kind of a big picture it seems very interesting and very promising about the Land Trust in general is that they're consulting with a whole variety of experts on these things. They have an economic team that includes the tax collector and treasurer of the county of Humboldt and former executive director of Humboldt Area Foundation, Peter Pennycamp. And for the green building side, they're consulting heavily with Schatz Energy Lab at Humboldt State University. So they're planning on using everything from solar panels to like carbon sequestering timber for the wood construction. I mean, it sounds very ambitious and very interesting. To your second question about who owns the land underneath these projects, they're actually starting with the Eureka projects because the property city owned. They don't need to purchase it, so they just need to look at financing the building of the project and stuff like that. So it's kind of a lower hanging fruit. But moving beyond that into the future, the plan is that for each of these projects or these developments that they take on, the Land Trust will coordinate the purchase of the property, but then it will be the Wiyot tribe that actually owns the deed for the land that the project is built on, and then either the Land Trust or some other entity would own the structure on top of the land. And so, for example, one of the things that they're talking about doing is creating cooperative housing. And converting old Victorian homes into fourplexes or duplexes. There would be multifamily homes within the same structure. It just involves some renovation. And so under that framework, the Dishkamu Humboldt would buy a property, and then the Wiyot tribe would own the land, but then the structure on top would then be sold to multiple families who want home ownership but can't attain kind of your stereotypical three bed, 2-bath house in McKinleyville.
Right on, yeah, making housing attainable for people. Otherwise, it wouldn't ordinarily have been, which is really great.
Along those same lines, one of the things that I think is really interesting and promising is this idea they have for eco-villages, what they're calling them, which is essentially buying a stretch of land that would normally be subdivided into 4, maybe 6 single-family homes, and developing it as a whole into kind of a tiny house village. And so the idea there is that the structures would be much smaller. There'd be single family homes, but they would be mini. But you could fit more of them on this land, and then you would have a number of communal structures and communal spaces. And so the idea is to kind of have parking around the outside of the development and have a number of walking trails and fire access trails on the inside. But then you could have community gardens and horticulture ponds and solar panels and kind of make this eco-groovy little village of tiny homes that feels kind of, I think the word David Cobb used to describe it was bucolic, but kind of feels open and full and rich, but is really created on the same amount of space that it would take to make 4 or 6 stereotypical single family homes.
So as if this wasn't all exciting enough, there's another element of this which also includes educating the workforce and getting local community members trained up to participate in construction projects and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about what you heard on that front too?
Yeah, and so this is actually a hugely important piece to Michelle Vassal, who said that kind of a roadblock that, or kind of, I guess, a two-sided roadblock that the tribe has just repeatedly run into is not being able to find enough skilled workers to find local labor to take on construction projects and other kinds of development projects that the tribe is interested in pursuing. And then the flip side of that is just not having enough kind of well-paying jobs locally, and not having enough training and apprenticeship programs that get people who, maybe haven't had a traditional education, but through a training model that gets them to the point where they have some kind of specialized labor skills. And so she is working with College of the Redwoods, which has a great building program, but has run into problems finding just kind of the apprenticeship placements or the field training components to that program. And so what they're going to do is they're pledging that all local projects will be built with local labor. And the way they're getting local labor kind of signed on is they're also requiring that they would then be willing to take on apprentices in these projects. And so she kind of views it as, this mutual growth thing of funding local labor by hiring them for projects, but then also using these projects to train the next, the next group of local skilled laborers.
So this all sounds so aspirational, but yet each element of it is actually workable. And so I was just curious, and there's a lot more in the article, of course, but for final thoughts on this, this is kind of like lead by example, or build it and they will come. This is they're working through this process. It's pie in the sky, but they're doing it. So can you just give us some final thoughts about, kind of the feedback you got from the folks you spoke with about that element of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely aspirational, and that's both from the standpoint of putting local land use decisions and development decisions back in native hands, which is re-indigenizing some of these processes, and then from the more cooperative, the vision of a more cooperative economy. Obviously, I think a huge hurdle that all of this is going to need to get over is the funding side of things. They have some really, I think, a very dynamic partner in Taj James at Full Spectrum Capital Partners, who is, it seems, very well versed in taking on some projects, not quite like this, but kind of forward-looking projects and getting, unique funding mechanisms for them in other areas. They have formed what's called, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this, I'm sorry, it's Gouts Lakawuth Hiwetch Fund, which means money that makes us well in Wiyot. And so this is going to be an investment fund that is hopefully going to lure kind of local Humboldt County residents who maybe believe in some of the ideals here and have some money in Wall Street, take that money out of Wall Street, donate it to, or not donate it, but invest it in this fund, hopefully to get a similar rate of return, maybe over a little bit longer, as opposed to a quick turnaround. But they're also, Taj and his team are also looking at all kinds of other funding mechanisms, from just basic philanthropic donations to, utilizing some of the grant money and stuff that's available for both low-income housing, green building, and then also native housing and tribal efforts. And so they're really hoping that they can weave this funding fabric from all these sources to really get these projects rolling, which will be exciting to see.
I mean, that's the word I was thinking. This is pretty exciting. I like the idea of so much of it. So much of it is like the land back element of it, and also just getting the community involved in investing in itself and in the future. So thank you for covering it, and I look forward to hearing more about it as this project moves forward.
It'll be fun to see how it unfolds.
Right on. How about you, Jennifer? What's going on the Arts and Features beat this week?
Well, quite a bit. I am extremely excited. It is once again food truck time.
Nice.
So on Juneteenth, which, last month, oh my God, was June already last month? Juneteenth, I went to the Arcata Juneteenth celebration on the plaza in order to, and for those of you who need a refresher, Juneteenth being the celebration of the announcement of the end of slavery in the United States. And so it was a great event. A lot of people gathered, it was like our inching back into gathering again, one of those early events. And, it was a really great moment for, particularly Black residents of Humboldt and Black-owned businesses. And there were a few trucks over to the side. And the one that I was most curious about was the new one. And that is the Razzmatazz truck. And it's a big silver truck. It's big. It's a big truck. And it weirdly, okay, so it used to be the Simmer Down truck, the big yellow truck. I did not remember it being a behemoth this way. But anyway, it's this big silver truck, and you'll know it because it has a picture of a Black woman's face with a crown and Afro puffs, and it's the cutest thing ever. And it is actually a drawing done by the daughter, Taziah, the daughter of the woman who owns the truck, LaToya Fields. And so this is a soul food truck. We need soul food in Humboldt so desperately, and here it is. So I was really excited to find out about the new truck, the new business. You know, like whenever people are starting in this restaurant climate, I'm always intrigued. And it's a little bit amazing. So LaToya Fields, originally from Compton, she grew up there, and she's got some Southern roots as well. Her grandmother's from Mississippi, and her dad was from Chicago. So she has sort of a long history of, you know, sort of the seats, some of the seats of Black cooking, of African-American cooking in America. And that is lots of really standard soul food that she grew up on is making its way onto the menu for her truck. And things are done exactly her family's way. And it was really interesting to me. I asked her about how she started cooking, and she started cooking like a lot of people do, helping out at home. And in her home, when she was growing up, her mom used to take in foster kids. So that meant 4 or 5 more kids in addition to her and her brother. So her mom would cook in vats. And then she would make up plates. And then the kids, whenever they were hungry, when they get back from school, from sports, whatever everybody's different schedules were, they would get back home and they could grab a plate and have a full, healthy meal. And, you know, as a latchkey kid, I appreciate that. So anyway, she also learned to cook in vats and kept cooking in vats, even when it was just her and her daughter moving up to Humboldt. She came to Humboldt to go to HSU. And while she was a student, she would still cook in vats and cook ahead and freeze some of it. And whatever didn't, you know, fit in them or fit in the freezer, she would give out to friends. She was always like giving away food, like, you need something to eat. And people really appreciated a home cooked meal, and really appreciated home cooked meals that were not available here. We have, you know, lost some, bless my soul, vanished. We don't have really that many restaurants that do items that really cover soul food. And even if they are cooking them, they're not going to be the same. Southern fried chicken is a different animal than other fried chicken. And you know, David, you know from our discussions that I am on a personal fried chicken journey. Yeah. So this was very exciting for me. But she learned to cook all this stuff. And then eventually, you know, she needed money when she moved up here, and she didn't have a job. So she started cooking and selling plates. And that meant she and her daughter were at home together, like making chicken and waffles and making collard greens and making, you know, mac and cheese, making all these big vats of food, and then selling plates, some of them to her daughter's teachers at school and some of them online. She had one of those off the books businesses that happen online, and she was selling like $10 plates of food. And that was how she made a living for a while. And then she got a steady job. She still did it on the side. But here and there, she really did kind of want to start a business, and people always encouraged her to do it. So eventually, you know, she's at a barbecue with a friend, and her friend was like, yeah, you should start a business. She's like, yeah, I know. I should get a truck or something. And then the friend went on Craigslist and was like, I found you a truck. And so now all of a sudden she's got to do it, right? So interestingly, she actually got the Simmer Down truck because she was the only one. I mean, she had the money for it, but she was the only one who showed up with a vehicle that could actually pull it away. And she said to me, I don't even care. She's like, I might kill my truck doing this today, but I am getting this food truck home with me. And then they started, and the whole family pitched in on everything from scraping the paint to, learning recipes or learning to do the prep work that she needed. Her boyfriend, Stacy Fowler, who's a professional caterer, came in and has been helping her with the menu, with cooking. And then, from there, she hired some of her daughter's teenage friends. She has 2 daughters in the truck and then 3 of their friends. And there's a bunch of teenagers working in there learning to cook professionally. And I think one of the things that I found really amazing, other than the food, which I tried and which is very good, I think what was amazing is she's really, without, having a big agenda or, a big mission statement, she's really trying to do something that is workable and just. You have your kids working for you. You work for a family business, you're probably not going to get paid, or you're going to get paid whatever you're going to get paid. But everybody's full employees, and none of the teenagers are off the books. They're all learning to work jobs and learning to do food service and getting paid. And her, when we talked about it, she was saying, these aren't kids. They're not privileged kids. She doesn't want them to feel taken advantage of. She wants them to feel like their work is worth something, to learn the work ethic, but also to learn to value your own work and not be taken advantage of, which is something that, a lesson that we're really learning in the pandemic as we look at the food industry. But she's also trying to keep the cost of food down. For the massive chicken thigh with the tail on, thank you. A big old smothered chicken thigh is like $2.75.
Oh, wow.
It's a little bit ridiculous. Everything's a la carte. And I would say that a side of greens that you could split with a couple people, 2 to 3 people, is like, what is it, $3.75? Peach cobbler's about the same. A fried pork chop is $4.50. And I asked her, I was like, can you do this? Can you make a profit? And she's kind of figured out what the smallest margins she can work on are. Because, as she put it to me, she remembers being broke and being a broke single mom. And she was saying, I want to survive. I want to thrive in my business, but not at the expense of somebody not being able to eat good food. And I really appreciated that. And she's over at the new Great Gas that used to be, I think, a Texaco on 14th and Broadway in Eureka. And so far, she's really developing a following. And, some people are new to soul food. Some people are homesick for it. But it's been really great to see, a cuisine that hasn't really blown up in Humboldt, find a home and, find people who love it to cook it.
So do they have oxtails?
There may be oxtails in future. There are not currently oxtails on the menu. There is, however, fried okra. The pork chop is very good. Mashed potatoes, etc. Of course, mac and cheese. There's a peach cobbler, which sold out really fast on Juneteenth. There's a lot.
I'm definitely going to have to check it out.
Yes.
I liked it better when you brought us samples, so maybe someday we'll get there.
Someday. We'll film from the truck next week. How about that? We do that.
Well, cool. Definitely. I'm sure I'm going to check it out. Hopefully other folks are too. We just have a few minutes left. Anything else you want to add about the Arts and Features Beat or what you guys are covering in the journal this week?
Yeah, we have a story about Strawberry Rock. Holly Ernest has been writing a series. If you haven't looked at any of them, go back in our archives and look up Sea to Summit. She's been doing this series of 10, it's like biking and hiking and sometimes swimming, these 10 challenges around Humboldt County where you start by getting your toes wet in the Pacific and then end up at some high peak. And this time around, she went to Strawberry Rock, which I feel it's important to say is private property. It's trespassing. Doesn't matter how many people you see there. It doesn't matter how many times you've been there, etc. Is all kinds of trespassing. I believe there are very clear signs.
I don't remember.
And this is a tutorial challenge, right? Like, how do I get our writer to really share the experience without getting her arrested. And the statute of limitations on trespassing in California is 3 years. So, if you need to purge your Instagram, maybe do that. But, we talked to we got an update, which is that the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust is still working on an agreement to try and create like an easement, like a path that will allow the public to go on there. The owners, Green Diamond, still owns that property, and they said you are not allowed on this property without permission. And they do give permission for special events and educational events and things like that. But they did, let us know that there are, of course, safety issues with, active timberland with the public on it that's not meant to be, a public trail. So it's something to consider, but maybe instead of trespassing, you can just read about Holly's experience of it and maybe wait a little longer, give the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust a chance to make it legal.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We will check that out also. North Coast Journal is available online and on newsstands now. Pick one up, stay informed, stay entertained, and also stay safe. Thank you guys very much. This was really interesting. We look forward to talking to you guys again next week. Take care.
Thanks, David.